My name is Councillor Keith Kandaka, and this is a short video about the very dishonest housing projections used for the draft Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Plan. I'm very keen that we actually go for a target of 6,560 homes, not the ridiculous target of 10,040 homes that is planned by the Borough Council. Back in 2013, the preferred option for the Borough Plan was consulted on. This talked about a need for 7,900 homes for an estimated 12,000 extra jobs the Borough Council thought we could produce. Now in 2015 we have a new draft Borough Plan that is based upon an incredible 10,040 houses being built in the borough, but for only an extra 4,800 jobs. Since 2011 we have less jobs, a slowing economy in the borough, slowing house building and an outflow of the working age population. These projections are clearly mad, and this video will actually go into the detail of all the projections. The targets in the Borough Plan are based upon three variables that are projected ahead for the next 20 years. They are the population, the employment statistics, that is how many jobs we have, how much commuting there is, and how much housing we'll need, which also includes how many homes will be occupied and how many families. The Borough Plan seems to now be based upon two dishonest projections, and these have been cascaded. Firstly, there's the Oxford economics model, which is being misused to generate a excessive jobs creation prospect, and then GL Hearn have applied some magical statistics to these to create an even more unbelievable figure for the housing we're going to create in this borough. The 2013 Borough Plan preferred option consultation used a model from Oxford Economics. This is basically looking at employment growth and using the employment growth then to generate a expected growth in housing. This employment growth could actually be put in by the council officers, so effectively it wasn't modelling what the employment growth would be, but what would happen if you had a certain level of employment growth. And obviously, as I've already said, we haven't even achieved that level of growth. The Oxford economics modelling actually was run for various levels of economic growth. Their baseline growth level produced a requirement for 338 homes per year. Assuming we would create 0.5% more jobs each year, that then led to a requirement of 341 homes per year, and if we could create 1% more jobs every single year, that would lead to a requirement of building 385 homes per year. Oxford Economics would consider 1% to be extremely optimistic for year-on-year growth. We then had the Borough Council, in its Borough Plan, put in an expectation of growing 1.5% jobs every single year, which equates to a requirement for 429 homes to be built. And if you gross up that 1.5% employment growth year on year, they were looking at employment in the borough growing by 30% in just 18 years. This graph shows the Oxford economic modelling. It actually shows the number of full-time jobs equivalent in the borough since 1991 to 2009-10 when they were doing the survey work. And it's full-time equivalents, which means that you need 2 half-time jobs to equal 1 full-time job. And looking forward at their projections, we have in pink 0.5% job growth per year, in red actually an economy growing at 1% extra jobs each year, and the blue line racing upwards, actually creating 1.5% more jobs every year. And as I said, that equates to actually creating 12,000 jobs in the borough in just 18 years. And the red blob I've put on the graph is the approximate number of full-time equivalent jobs we have in the borough today, actually less than when they modelled. Going forward to today, we have economic modelling produced by GL Hearn. GL Hearn were originally paid to actually do the modelling for the Coventry Gateway project. This was a massive expansion of employment land on Greenbelt around Coventry Airport, and the case for the Coventry Gateway was put to a planning inspector, and that case was found not convincing. But GL Hearn have then gone on to actually model the housing need for the whole of Coventry and Warwickshire and produced 2 further updates. The modelling by GL Hearn is called the Strategic Housing Market Assessment. It actually goes down into the modelling for Coventry and also for the 5 districts in Warwickshire. It looks at the population, the jobs and the housing requirements in each of the districts. For the population projections, there are various sources of information. The Office of National Statistics, ONS, produce historic data and projections going forwards, and the national census that happens every 10 years provides a baseline of where we were in 2011. NOMIS is the government's employment statistics, and they produce employment based stats, basically how many people have got a job, how many people haven't got a job in the various areas, and then on top of that we've got economic based projections based upon how many jobs will be created and then how big the population effect will be based upon that level of employment. The GL Hearn report has a very useful table for all the various population projections at figure 22. The top projection is effectively where we were in 2012, the actual national statistics based projection, and that looks at the population of Nuneaton and Bedworth going up about 12,500. In the last 2 years we've had actually a reduction in working age population in Nuneaton, and a 2014 based update actually suggests the population of the borough will go up 7,823 over the 20 years, a far slower rate of population increase at about 6.5%. GL Hearn also do various other projections based upon different levels of migration, etc., and they give varying figures from about 7,000 to 15,000 increase in population over the 20 years, 2011 to 2031. Most alarmingly though, it seems that the borough plan is based upon the population of the borough going up about 18,000 over those years, an increase of 14.5%. Change in the population can be seen better if we actually look at them on a graph. This graph shows the population change for the last decade and various projections going forwards. The green line is actually what the population seems to have done, and this is from the Office of National Statistics, and these populations are for the middle of each year. So as you can see, the green line population was going up each year steadily, and the rate of increase has got slower and slower, and so between 2013 and 14 the population has risen just by 171, and if this trend of slowing carried on, the population may even start reducing in Nuneaton and Bedworth. The Office of National Statistics projection starts off at 2012 and is a yellow line going steadily upwards. It looks at a population growth of many thousands, maybe about 8,000, 8,500 over the 20 years. But if we look at the red line, this is the borough plan population projection, rising far faster than anything we've seen for particularly long term for recent years, and a continuous rise that just goes on and on. Even more alarming are the plans for the Coventry overspill. I've actually plotted on the blue line what the population of Nuneaton and Bedworth would have to do to actually create the 14,000 homes they were talking about in the overspill plans from the Economic Prosperity Board. This next graph shows the in-year population change, i.e. how much the population has grown by in any particular year. The red blocks are effectively the population change for the last 12 years, and as you can see it tends to be around 400. It has spiked up very high when they were doing some of the regeneration in Camp Hill, and it has tailed off significantly, and this last year's change was 171 extra people in the borough. And on top of this I've actually plotted various updates of projections of how the population will change in the future. The blue line at the top, that is the current projection for the borough plan. They're looking at the population of the borough going up by 910 for every year, not just up to 2031 but also since 2011, so we're clearly underperforming in terms of population growth. The green line with the dark blue dots, that shows the Office of National Statistics population projection based on 2012. So as you can see, they were expecting the population to have grown over the last couple of years. The population growth to peak just under 800, and the population growth to tail off as we get an older population. That clearly also hasn't happened. And then I've also plotted a 2014 update. They don't show me in the GL Hearn work how they expect the population to change as a profile across the years, but they're expecting less than 400 increase in population for each of the remaining years of the 20-year plan. This table shows the population changes within Nuneaton and Bedworth over the last 14 years. I've highlighted a couple of areas. Basically, the yellow area is the internal migration. These are the people coming in and out of the borough for work or education, etc. And as you can see, in the last 6 years, we've been generally losing population in Nuneaton and Bedworth to other parts of the country. The pink area is the period when we're actually gaining people from abroad. This is international migration. And as you can see, over the last few years, international migration has either been negative or, in the case of last year, 2. And then I've highlighted in blue, light blue, the last couple of years' actual total population change. And as you can see, last year the population only changed by 171. And I've highlighted in black a couple of years when we had a very large population rise, which I think was related to the rebuilding of Camp Hill, etc. This graph is actually from Warwickshire Council, and it shows the birth rate effectively across Nuneaton and Bedworth over the last 7 years in terms of what school year they're starting. So in 2015 we're obviously getting people starting primary school who were born several years earlier, and as you can see, the birth rate in Nuneaton and Bedworth has been slowly declining over the last 4 years. The other side to natural change in population is from how long we're all living, and recent years the life expectancy of a 65-year-old has gradually been increasing, and this chart shows how long people are expected to live from the age of 65 if you are male. And as you can see, parts of Coventry and Warwickshire, life expectancy has increased well and is significantly higher than the life expectancy in Nuneaton and Bedworth, some 3 years longer in the case of Stratford upon Avon compared to Nuneaton and Bedworth. The reduction in birth rate and the stagnation and the improvement in life expectancy will actually slow down the natural rate of change of our population. The other reason the population growth will vary across the Midlands is how much gross weekly pay is for employees in different parts of the region. This table shows all the West Midlands weekly wages by locations. This is where people work, and as you can see, Nuneaton and Bedworth has one of the lowest rates of pay in the West Midlands region, and interestingly it's significantly lower than places that are very close, for example Rugby, Warwick, Coventry. So if you were working in Nuneaton, you get on average £418 a week. If you're working in Warwick, it's £514. So this is actually causing a population drift towards the areas like Warwick with far more healthy rates of pay, and effectively we're actually losing workforce and losing money in the local economy. The GL Hearn report has a table showing the employment growth by local authority over the first 3 years of the plan, and this is shown for both the ONS jobs force survey, what the Cambridge Economics forecast would happen, an Experian forecast, and a more up-to-date Cambridge Economic forecast. And you'll see in these tables that for Nuneaton and Bedworth, the ONS believe we've lost 1,000 jobs in Nuneaton and Bedworth at the beginning of the plan. Cambridge Economics expected us to gain 1,900 jobs. Experian expected us to gain 1,500, but the latest Cambridge Economics survey expects us roughly to have lost 2,400 jobs in Nuneaton and Bedworth in just the first 3 years of the plan. Looking at a graph of employment in Nuneaton and Bedworth since 1991, Cambridge Economics are predicting a very steady rise in employment following the long-term trend. The trend is obviously covered with ups and downs as we have good years, bad years, recessions, etc. And you'll notice employment actually peaked around 2006 in Nuneaton and Bedworth, declined during a recession, re-peaked around 2011, has then collapsed back down again. So this is showing how we've lost, say, around 2,500 jobs at the beginning of the plan, and it will take probably till about 2025 with gradual progress to get back to the levels of our peak. The NOMIS data is produced every quarter for the number of employees that live in a particular town. This is broken into two types of data: the actual number of people in work and the actual employees, i.e. the people who work for someone else. Once a year they also provide data on how many people actually work within the borough of Nuneaton and Borough, and that is shown with the brown dots. And you can see that the data for all these three statistics is broadly flat, with a slight decline in the last couple of years. This data is done by surveys and obviously carries a measure of error, but it does show a sort of flattish trend on employment. This next graph shows a range of employment data and shows how it's very hard to compare the different types of data. The red line is actually from the Nuneaton and Borough forecast model that was used in the previous consultation, and this has data of full-time equivalent staff, whereas the later line, which is green with pink squares, this shows the Cambridge economics data, which is showing the total jobs, i.e. it's including part-time jobs as one rather than including them as a fraction. And on top of this I've actually plotted a couple more data points. The blue squares with a cross in the middle, that's the previous Cambridge economic data, and the green dots are the Experian forecast for employment in the Nuneaton and Borough. So you see that all the various trends are showing a steady increase in employment, but nothing radical. And you can see that the latest Cambridge economic forecast is roughly halfway between their previous forecast and the latest Experian forecast. This next graph is relating the number of people in work to the working age population, which are the green lines, and also the total population over 16, which includes obviously the over 65s. To make it more clear, I'm going to remove the origin from these graphs so we can take a closer look at each of these lines in detail. The dark blue line is actually history. That is how many people have been in work so far up to 2014. The green line, lighter green, is how many people are between 16 and 64 up to 2014, and the pinker coloured line is actually the total population over 16. And as you can see, the total population over 16 is increasing very sharply, and the working in work people are actually going up either slowly if you believe the Cambridge economics, or quite rapidly if you believe the economic modelling for the borough plan. I've now zoomed in on two parts of the graph. The top part now is showing the total population between 16 and 64, the working age population, and this in light green is the historic information. So you can see that the working age population has started to very slightly decline. The darker green line is what the Office of National Statistics expected the working age population to do, which is to say fairly flat at 80,000 for the whole of the 20-year period of the plan. At the bottom of the graph you can see again the in-work population, that is shown in the dark blue, and then going forward there are two separate projections. One is the Cambridge economics, which shows a very slow rise in employment over the period, and the second line is the creation of 8,000 jobs as predicted by the borough plan itself and the modelling used behind this proposal. I'm now showing the very top part of the graph we saw earlier, and this is the total population over the age of 16, and you can see the pink is showing the current growth in over 16 population, which is starting to slow down quite remarkably. And then we've got two projections going forwards again, what the Office of National Statistics believed in 2012 the population would do of over 16s, and also the GL Hearn's assumed population growth of the over 16s. So you can see quite a rapid growth in the population. This growth is actually down to the over 65s, so not a particularly working age population, and you can see how we're already not matching this growth in the first couple of years of the plan. I'm now going to talk about some of the tricks that GL Hearn have used to exaggerate how many jobs we're going to create in Nuneaton and Bedworth. The first thing I have to say is that GL Hearn are looking at the whole of Coventry and Warwickshire growing very rapidly, and that doesn't seem to be the case. And they seem to be applying different models to different places. For Nuneaton and Bedworth in particular, they're ignoring how many jobs we've lost over the last 3 years. So effectively they're only modelling from 2014 forwards to 2031 and ignoring the fact we've actually lost loads of employment. They're also ignoring faster job growth than anyone is predicting. They're taking it back to 2011. And then there's two little tricks they're using. One is to assume that the commuting ratio is staying the same. That's how many people actually commute out of town. And also that the employment ratio, which is the fraction of the population that's employed, actually continues to decline, even though they're predicting we'll have more jobs, which doesn't seem sensible to me. GL Hearn assume that the commuting ratio stays fixed for Nuneaton and Bedworth at 1.33. That basically means that 4 people have a job who work in Nuneaton for every 3 jobs in the town, and that the more jobs you create, so say you created 3 more jobs, actually they assume that an extra person would be commuting out, so you create 4 jobs, 1 outside Nuneaton for every 3 you create inside. Whereas this graph is actually the number of people commuting against the number of jobs there are in Nuneaton and Bedworth. And you can see over the last few years, as we've created more jobs in Nuneaton and Bedworth, the number of people commuting out has reduced, and as we've lost jobs in Nuneaton and Bedworth, the number of people commuting out has increased. So this effectively means not only does the commuting ratio change, but actually more jobs in Nuneaton actually means less commuting out, not more. The next thing I want to show you is GL Hearn's assumed employment ratio going forward over the next few years. This graph starts in 2014 and goes forward to 2031, and you can see the various coloured lines for the different boroughs and districts, and the purple line for Nuneaton implies that they think there will be just under 60% of people employed in Nuneaton and Bedworth who are 16 to 64 at the start of the period, and that will slowly drop about 1% as the period moves forwards. Importantly, GL Hearn do not consider that the employment ratio will change if we create more jobs, whereas in the real world, the more jobs we create, the high percentage of people are employed, and vice versa. When we lose jobs, the lower the ratio of employment. To demonstrate that point, I've plotted the employment ratio over the last 11 years, and effectively on this graph I've shown the number of people in work in the red line, and effectively the calculated employment ratio as the blue line. And as you can see, pretty well over the 11 years the employment ratio has moved in line with the number of people employed, and only gently as there's a different trend between the two lines. So fundamentally, if we create lots more jobs in Nuneaton, the employment ratio will change. Assuming the employment ratio stays the same, actually fictitiously inflates the population far more the more jobs you create. I'm now going to start talking about the housing numbers, starting with affordable housing. If you look at this table from the GL Hearn report, you can see the housing need in each of the districts, and importantly, a lot of the affordable housing is actually recycled. It's actually used over and over again, and so effectively the net need comes out of this table, which is actually how much more affordable housing you need each year. Now moving on to a table of the demographic-led housing need. This table shows the number of houses required to be built in each of the districts to actually cover the natural changes, migration, etc. within the district. The first column is the predictions from government, basically based in 2012. The second column is it updated for 2014, and then there's some more scenarios based upon constant migration, etc. And it's interesting to see how the expected need has now reduced to 328 per year based upon the very latest demographic information in 2014. This next table shows the housing numbers based upon economic driven scenarios. For the Nuneaton and Bedworth, it shows just over 400 houses required for each of the 3 economic models. 410 for the latest, which is based on Cambridge Economics 2015 modelling. Interestingly though, the number of houses for Coventry and Warwickshire in total they're expecting is about 3,500 based on this model. Second point I'd like you to note is the note at the bottom, which said that an Eaton and Bedded forecast model is slightly more positive and requires us to have 496 homes built each year. No information has been provided as to how that model creates that figure, and I even asked at a full council meeting for more information to be provided about that modelling, and the answer has been given: we must trust our officers, and trusting officers is not the same as evidence. This next table shows the final output of the modelling. This is GL Hearn's objective assessed housing needs, and if you notice, the total of all this table is 4,500, about 1,000 more than the housing need per year from the Cambridge economics modelling. And if you look at the table, it doesn't even add up. I've actually had to correct the number in the bottom box to 4,500. You can look at the Eaton and Bedded line and see the demographic modelling they're starting at is the 423, not the 328. You can see the 73 added in for economic growth, and then another magic 6 to improving affordability, even though the Eaton and Bedded has the lowest house prices in the region. This next graph shows the difference between the household numbers, i.e. how many houses there are and how many houses are actually occupied. The dark blue line is the housing stock up to 2010, and I've projected it forward with the Borough Council's annual monitoring report, which shows how many houses were added each year. And also on there is the green line, which actually shows how many occupied houses there are, effectively how many households there are in the borough, and this of course excludes people in care homes. I've now added on to the graph the projections from the borough plan. The pink line at the top is the modelling, the Eaton and Bedded forecast model, which bizarrely seems to get the number of houses wrong up to about 2005 and projects an ever increasing number of households and houses in the borough. The purpley line, light purple, was the previous version of the borough plan that predicted we'd build 7,900 homes, and then you can see the slight difference already building up between the light blue and the purple, as we've actually effectively under-delivered even on the less ambitious version of the plan. I've now added a linear trend line to the growth in households in the Eaton and Bedded, which is shown as a dotted green line, and also marked on 2011 when the plan starts. And you can see by the time we get to 2031, if we built out at the rate predicted by the borough plan, we would have many thousands of empty homes. And I've indicated in the green circle the sort of numbers of homes we should have in 2031, so that we've got between 1 and 3,000 effectively spare empty homes at any moment. Looking at the borough plan's vision of the future, we would have 6,000–7,000 empty homes in the future, which is clearly mad, and clearly those houses cannot be sustained by the gradual increase in the number of households. This chart shows the house building in the borough in Borough over the last 12 years, and as you can see, over the last 9 years house building has consistently been around the 300 level, with a slight reduction in 2009 and 2013 and a slight rise in 2014 as the extra care units in Bedworth were produced. We also can see how much higher house building was when the Camp Hill regeneration project was going on, or at least started in 2002 onwards. The green line on this chart is the demographic need for new housing, i.e. running at 328 a year. The orange line is the earlier demographic projection at just over 400, and I've also marked on the chart the 502 level of house building per year, which is expected from the new borough plan. And it's important to say this is backdated, so they expect us to have been building 502 houses all the way back to 2011, and any unmet house buildings going back to 2011 is expected to be made up over the rest of the plan. So effectively this is a plan to build around 600 homes a year going forwards. I've also marked right at the top of the graph the expected level of house building from the Coventry overflow suggestions, and this is actually expecting us to build over 700 houses a year, backdated to 2011, and this is clearly a ludicrous figure. Some of the population of Nuneaton and Borough don't live in traditional housing, and these have been ignored in the projections. We have a large number of people in institutional type accommodation, care homes, etc., and these aren't being effectively provided for in some ways by the plan, and in other ways they're being double counted. The institutional population is going to almost double during the period of the plan, as more people are getting older and need to live in care homes, etc. And we also have a small number of people on gypsy and traveller sites and living on canal boats, also being ignored by the plan. In conclusion, the work of GL Hearn is based on 3 dishonest calculations. A dishonest calculation of the population projection. The population is rising far slower in Nuneaton and Borough than they predict, and we're losing working age population. A dishonesty about the job projections. We've actually lost employment in the borough over the last 3 or 4 years, and actually going forwards we may get some of those jobs back, but we're unlikely very quickly to get back to the employment levels of 2011, let alone create 8,000 jobs from that reference point. And a very dishonest housing projection. As we've underperformed on population and jobs, we haven't needed the thousands of houses predicted, and in fact the housing growth rate has been a fairly steady 300 houses a year, and that is liable to go forward into the future. We desperately need around 6,000 houses to meet our needs. We do not need 10,000. This video was produced by Keith Kandaka based upon the best available information on the 10th of December. Obviously there's lots of things being kept secret from me, and I welcome clarification from GL Hearn and the Borough Council over how on earth they calculated their figures.